Let's tie a Trico Spinner next. This is a spinner of one of the most important hatches during the summer months, particularly in the Rockies. This is a very small spinner that typically falls in the morning and can draw the biggest fish in the river up, and if nothing else, all the fish in the river up. This is a great hatch to fish, some of the most fun dry fly fishing that you'll ever run into. The bonus is these flies are small, but they're very easy to tie. We're going to start off with the Tiemco 2488. This is a 2 extra short wide gap hook. These bugs are very small, but I like to use these wide gap hooks just to increase our odds of actually getting them stuck in the fish. The tail on this fly is going to be made out of white microfibbits. We're going to split these 3 fibers in there to match the natural. The wing will be that same white McFlylon. The thorax will be black superfine dubbing, and the abdomen will be black thread. I like to use a fine black tying thread, 74 denier or 10/0, either one will work. And one of the first things to do on this fly, and the hardest thing to remember, is before you get started, take about a 6 or 8 inch length of thread and clip it off your bobbin and set it aside. Put it somewhere where it won't blow away, because we're going to need that in a minute. So what I'll do here is I'm going to start my thread just a couple eye lengths back from the hook eye. And I'm going to wrap back to the bend. Now on this hook, it's got a slight curve to the shank, so I don't want to get too far down the bend. I want to kind of keep a short little fly on even a shorter shank. So I'm not going to go all the way back down where I'm around the bend of the hook. Now I'm going to select out 3 of these white microfibbits. And I want to even the tips up, so I've got them as close to square as I can. And Trico spinners have a disproportionately long tail, usually 2 or 3 times their body length. One thing to be cautious of is don't make the tails too long. These tails are much stiffer than the natural's tails, and if you make them too long, the surface area of the fly will be such that that stiff tail will push the fly out of the fish's mouth when he tries to eat it. So I've got to make it a little longer than a normal tail, but I don't want to make it actually as long as the natural's tail. So I'm going to go about 2 shank lengths. I'm going to lay all 3 of these fibers in at the bend and catch them right on top of the hook with 3 or 4 turns of thread. I'll take my thumbnail and press it up underneath those tails to sort of kink them upright, and then I could just spread them out a little bit with my fingers. I'll pull the outside tails out and leave that center tail right square on top of the hook. So I've got a nice forked tail at the bend of the fly. Now the catch on this is that looks great now, but it won't stay that way while we fish it. So in order to keep those tails spread, we're going to return to that piece of thread that we saved earlier, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it between the bobbin and the vise underneath the hook, and I'll slide it up and make a loop around the hook bend. I'm now going to take that center tail and put it in the center of that loop, and I'll draw this strand of thread up, and that will help to hold and separate the tails. Now as I pull on this a bit, you can see that I'll draw the outside tails out a little bit. When I get them where I want, I can anchor that down with a few turns of thread. So I've got a nice widespread tail that's going to hold up the bend of the hook and be much more realistic than just a clump of hackle fibers. I'll trim off the stub ends of the tails and the tag ends of the thread, and I'm going to run back to the bend one more time with another layer of thread. As small as Tricos are, they're a pretty stocky bug. They've got a relatively thick body, so I want to try to keep that a little thicker than I would on a lot of other spinner patterns. So I brought the thread all the way up to the hook eye. I'm going to bring it back again to about the 80% point. And on a little fly like this, I'm going to use maybe 1/5 of a strand of the white McFlylon. And I'm going to lay this in, and I'm going to tie it in with a couple of X wraps. So 2 wraps one direction, draw my near side toward me and go 2 more wraps. And then I'll follow that up with 1 more wrap each direction just to lock things in place. And that'll spread those, push my tail down there, that'll spread those wings out at a right angle to the hook shank, like so. Now we're going to dub the thorax. And again, because these are sort of a chunky little bug, their thorax is pretty prominent. These always remind me of the strongman of mayflies. They've got a real thick chest area. So I'm going to put a little more dubbing than would be intuitive on a little fly like this. But I want a real thin strand. And I'm going to work this around the base of the wings, behind the wings a bit, and in front of the wings, just to sort of even everything out. And then I'll use up the bulk of the dubbing just working front to back to thicken up that thorax. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to whip finish here, just behind the hook eye. Trim that thread off. The wings on this fly I'm going to lift just back, just above the hook. I'm going to trim just even with the outside edge of the hook bend. And then I'll spread those out a bit. Those fibers tend to kind of group together when you pinch them and tie them in. So we want to spread them out a little bit so they've got some more surface area to them. You can straighten your tails out a little. And that's our Trico spinner.